trained for seeing this night, for watching and for caring about British Columbia. I care deeply about this province too. I care about the fact that our youth want to be able to have a future here. I care about the fact that our youth want to be able to have safety here. You know, we have a government that kicks out a Jewish cabinet minister, Selena Robinson, to appease a mob who last night was burning flags in front of the art gallery. I find that incredibly offensive. In British Columbia, we want to make sure we build that positive opportunity for people to have that future. It's why our entire plan is about putting you first, whether it's healthcare and patients first, whether it's our economy and making sure you can build a job, whether it is the investments that are needed for infrastructure. I'm a proud Canadian, and I can tell you the Conservative Party of British Columbia will bring forward a common sense plan that will deliver real prosperity for everyone here in British Columbia. Thank you for watching this evening. I mind that our ports are wide open. The German report has said that less than 1% of containers in the British Columbia are actually checked. The federal government exited the scene in 1997, and the problem has only gotten worse under David Eby. I suggested, and I still move forward, the plan that we are going to strengthen our port police. We're going to actually make sure that that force is there and available to be able to do that work. David Eby said, oh, you can't do that, it's federal. Watch us. We're going to make sure that we crack down on these ports. We're going to bring an end to the organized crime, the drugs and the guns that are coming through our ports.
Don't have
we're going to work with the federal government to strengthen our borders right around. We're going to do everything we can to actually even go after the components that go into making these drugs so that we can get these dangerous drugs off our streets. They're killing people on a regular basis. This needs to happen, and a Conservative government's going to make sure that we put the resources there to end our ports being
loaded lumber in a container before.
There's no question when you look at this crisis of overdoses and drug addictions in British Columbia, it is horrendous what is happening here. Last year, just over 5,700 people died in Canada. Close to half of those were in British Columbia, 2,500 people in British Columbia alone. Clearly what that means is the policies in this province are not working. If you look at any other province by any other measure, they are performing better than we are in British Columbia. So we need to take a different approach. We need to make sure that we bring an end to decriminalization and safe supply. We need to bring an end to this, to the government being a drug dealer, quite frankly. What we need to do in British Columbia is build up recovery. And yes, you're right, there is significant investment that's needed, and we're going to make those investments. Everything from doctor-prescribed treatment to short-term recovery, to longer-term recovery, and to involuntary, compassionate recovery. These are things that need to be done. We're going to build out this capacity. But I'll tell you the story of Christian. Christian, who was a 13-year-old, and when he was first addicted and not told by his parents did everything they possibly could to try to get help for him. He eventually passed away when he was 28. And when I talked to the mom said, I asked the government to try to help me and they refused. They didn't even answer the phone.
That's time. Okay, Mr. Eby, thank you.
I lost my father-in-law and I lost my mother in that year. But we were able to keep them in their home right to the end because we're able to support with family. There was not the level of care, unfortunately, for many, many seniors that are out there to be able to do that. And we know that when seniors can stay in the home, their quality of life is much better. And for me, we were able to provide that quality of life for my parents. But I know many families can't. And that's where we need to be able to make sure we're supporting those families to be able to stay in their homes.
Okay, I'm going to allow you to come back in, Mr. Eby.
When you look forward at what needs to happen going forward, David Eby cannot defend the record that he has and the damage that's being done in BC, especially for seniors. Seniors need that respect and care. They can't get a doctor. When an emergency room is closed, does a senior have to go an hour and a half, 2.5 hours down the road for the next one? And that is David Eby's record. We need to make sure that those services are there and available. We also need to make sure that we're coming into their homes, providing support, and working with families to make sure that support's there.
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, when we were all rolling up our sleeves to get vaccines to protect vulnerable seniors from COVID-19, Bonnie Henry was working night and day to keep us safe during the pandemic. You know, John Rustad and his candidates were providing donations to people who are protesting outside of hospitals, anti-vax convoy members. He's still an anti-vaxxer. He appeared in front of a group of people that he called you called it a so-called COVID vaccine. You said you wish you'd never been vaccinated. And then when someone said, do you think that public health professionals should be tried like Nazi war criminals? You said, well, we wouldn't do that in BC, but we would support an international effort to do that, John. It's embarrassing. You know, I wouldn't fire Bonnie Henry. I'm trying to hire you and your family a family doctor. We've connected 250,000 people to family doctors. We've got so much more to do. But if you think that we'll be safer in our province with someone who doesn't believe that vaccines work in charge of things,
Thank you very much, actually. The reality is, I'm triple vaccinated. The reality is, in British Columbia, I also promoted and supported people getting vaccinated, especially for seniors. Especially for seniors in our communities. I was supportive of that. However, I am not anti-vax, I am anti-mandate. I believe that people should have choice. It shouldn't be thrust upon them or forced upon them or coerced to be able to take a vaccine.
You never know which John Rustad's going to show up.
Sure.
Okay,
When he's talking to supporters, he says, I
let
regret
Ms. First
getting the
announce.
vaccine tonight. Now he's proud to
I'll
be
explain that to you if you want.
I
You never know. You never
I
know
don't
who you're
expect
gonna
that these
talk
two are door knocking,
Just
but I
wanted to be
am.
clear on that. When it comes to seniors and what needs to be done with seniors care in this province, we've laid out a very comprehensive plan. Everything from building more long-term care facilities in this province, a commitment of 5,000 new beds. But more than that, we need to work with seniors, and we need to work with families to be able to support them at home. That's why we're going to create tax credits that are available. We're going to expand services at home. A nurse came to me in my riding, and she told me this story, and she goes home in tears because she's been going out and she's talking to seniors, and they're saying, can we please get some help? And she's saying, there's none available. I'm so sorry. That is wrong. Seniors need to be treated with respect. We need to work to be able to support them at home because we know that's where the best outcomes are. There's much more we need to do. We're expanding the Safer program, shelter aid for elderly residents. There's a lot more that can be done and that we have a plan to be able to deliver. But we have the second most expensive healthcare system and we're getting second worst outcomes. We are in a crisis in BC. We're in a crisis. ER rooms are closed all across this province. In the city of Maryland, between now and Christmas, it's anticipated there'll be 32 more days of closure of an ER room. It could take 8, 10, 12 hours or longer to wait for emergency rooms. People have died waiting in emergency rooms. There was a lady, she was in labor. She went into the hospital and she miscarried in the washroom and sat there with covered in blood, waiting for hours for services in an emergency room. That is David Beebe's healthcare in BC. And quite frankly, it really tears me apart and it makes me upset. We need to be able to make sure that we're retaining our doctors, that we're bringing back the healthcare workers that were let go. We need to make sure we have a model in this province where doctors want to stay here and work with people and we can unleash the full potential of family doctors. We need to be able to make sure we deal with training and the people coming into our province. There's so much that needs to be done on healthcare and it's not happening under David Eby. This is why we have the Rustad rebate so that your rent and your mortgage can be written off so that you get a rebate on that right away to make life more affordable for people in BC.
Okay, and we've got to keep moving, lots more to get to.
Airbnbs are licensed by municipalities. Airbnbs are zoned by municipalities. They just go up anywhere. This is something that's within local government. But once again, David Eby's approach is just to be an authoritarian. My perspective is quite simple on this. We've seen a 30% decline in housing. This year it's anticipated there'll be less than 17,000 housing starts in British Columbia. We need to be seeing 30, 40, or 50,000 housing starts.
John, why didn't you do that? In 16 years you were in government, we wouldn't be in this mess.
In 2017, they promised 114,000 homes, and what did they build? I think about 14,000. Now he's promising 300,000. You cannot trust David Eby to be able to deliver these numbers because he is too comfortable with the numbers. They say it takes too long. It takes 4 to 7 years or longer.
So then, John, why are you putting more red tape in their way? Why are you trying to undo?
We need to get government out of the way and make sure that we can unleash it. And this is why we have to work with municipalities, not run roughshod over them or bully them. We need to work with municipalities to get the permitting process cleaned up. You know, in Vancouver, if I could just add one quick
point. We need the housing now.
In Vancouver, they have 274 bylaws associated with housing, and over 70 people have to touch a project. It's no wonder it takes years, if not a decade, to get housing projects built.
Okay, Mr. Eby wants to respond.
Thanks.
Able to have children. But I think any parent would want to do everything they can to make sure that there's an opportunity for their kids to be able to build a future here in British Columbia. And I will ask you this, in 7 years of NDP government, has anything been better? Is housing improved? Housing has been in a crisis. We've seen a 30% decline just this year on housing starts. And I talk to people, there are tens of thousands of housing units that have started and are now defunct that are not going ahead in British Columbia. This is failure of policy. This is why the Conservatives have a common sense plan to unleash the potential of the private sector to build that housing, to build those rental units, to make sure that people can have a home here, to make sure that our kids can stay here in British Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Rustad.
Thank you very much for the question. To start with, we did not say we'll remove rent caps, and we're not going to remove rent caps. That's something that's very clear to me done that needs to be done in British Columbia. When we look at housing,
concerned about that wealth, we would be taxing that wealth. There's no plan in the NDP platform, there's no Conservative platform so far, but if we were concerned about that enormous accumulation of wealth, if we were concerned about the growing inequality and the growing poverty, we would be looking at ways to actually tax some of that wealth. We have that in our platform. Silence from the NDP.
So look,
silence from the Conservatives.
You just said what David Eby just said. David Eby actually said the private sector has no place in housing, and that's just wrong.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did, sweetie. The reality as well is this: we are going to cut the carbon tax. By getting rid of the carbon taxes in British Columbia, that will save $1,200 for a family today.
You said that,
and then
John.
David Eby, he wants to actually double the carbon tax in his next term. That is what he has said he will do. And so this is the reality we're facing in British Columbia. That is more money just in the carbon tax saving alone than what he is proposing with his taxes. And for him to come out and say that $900 right away for the Rustad rebate in terms of rent
John.
and in terms of mortgages, those are people, hardworking people in British Columbia that will get that benefit right away. And I wish we could bring the whole thing in, except that the fiscal mismanagement and a $14 billion deficit being proposed by David Eby will take away the future of people.
Mr. Eby, you seem to want to respond.
Well, I don't even know where to start here, Shati.
I feel like I live in a different place from John Rustad. His vision of BC is one that is dark and gloomy. We need a vision of hope. If we want young people to stay here, we have to give them a reason to stay.
Shachi, we need hope and a plan. And that's what we're delivering for young people. Now, John Rustad's...
When I think about British Columbia and I think about the fact that 1 in 2 youth are thinking about leaving British Columbia, that to me is a failure of leadership. It's weak leadership in British Columbia. People should be able to hope and build a dream here. Today in British Columbia, there is close to half the people that have passed because of an overdose. In Canada, right here in British Columbia, it is failures of government policy. We need to make sure that we can build hope for people. We need to make sure that we can unleash our resources and our economy so that people can build that hope
It's
and
astonishing.
build that future.
It really is astonishing to hear.
Thank you very much. And when I look at what's going on in British Columbia today, there are people dying on the streets. The people dying on the streets, whether it's from crime or whether it's drugs. I was on my way over here, and at the corner of Robson and Hornby, there's an individual who died. And there was emergency people rushing. This person died from an overdose. This is the British Columbia that David Eby has created. 10 cities are growing all over the place. We have a crisis in healthcare. We've got a crisis in affordability. We've got a crisis in housing. What we need is a common sense plan that is going to be able to deliver for people in this province. British Columbia has all the potential you could ever want. We have all the resources that we could ever want. We've got a well-trained, well-educated population, but we're hopelessly managed. What's needed in British Columbia is a government that will tackle these issues, that will make sure we get government out of the way, and that we make sure that people can once again be proud to be British Columbia and to be able to build a future here.
Thank you, Mr. Rustad. Mr. Eby.